Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio show. I'm your host, Robert Helms. We invest in real estate expecting things to go well, but prudent investors always plan for things to not go so well. We have multiple exit strategies. We create a plan B and C. So how do you get through it when things actually go wrong? That's a topic that'll make you a better investor on the Real Estate Guys radio program. All aboard! Registration is open for the Real Estate Guys 22nd Annual Investor Summit. Imagine spending more than a week with like-minded investors, world-class educators, and real-world professionals. Returning in 2024 is the editor of the Gold newsletter, Brian London, real estate developer Beth Clifford, and the rebel capitalist George Gammon. Back with us in 2024, sales legend and best-selling author Tom Hopkins. And joining us live and in person for his 12th Investor Summit, Ken McElroy. Plus 2 brand new faculty members we can't even mention yet, and a lot more. It all begins June 13th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Visit investorsummitatc.com to get all the details and reserve your spot. This transformational week is like no conference you've ever attended. Go to investorsummitatc.com and make plans to spend a week with the Real Estate Guys, Ken McElroy, Tom Hopkins, and an all-star faculty on the 22nd Annual Investor Summit at Sea. Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. Joining me are co-host financial strategist Russell Gray.
Hey, Robert.
We're pretty optimistic guys. In fact, we say opportunities are for optimists. Otherwise, they call them pessitunities. But let's face it, things have been challenging. And right now, there is war in the world. And that is a sombering time.
It is 1,000% concerning. And sometimes you got to take a step back. I don't always appreciate being an older guy. But right now I kind of do, because I've seen enough. I've seen a lot, and I'm old enough to remember the stories of my parents and my grandparents. And I look back on the history of their lives and the things they've been through. And the big picture is, along the way, as long as you have the right to own private property, as long as you have that right, you have the opportunity to build wealth. And if you own things that are real and essential to human existence, unless you think whatever is going on in the world is an existential threat and the human race is going to cease, then the need for real estate, housing, in particular, energy, food, these things, even healthcare and the real estate that supports healthcare, all of those things are probably going to continue to be in demand. And then it just gets down to the blocking and tackling of finding the right deal and the right opportunity and putting together the right capital stack and managing the thing for the long haul. And so it's easy when things go crazy, either in your own personal life or locally or nationally or right now on a global stage or a combination of all those things. The temptation is to pull the covers up over your head and just wait for it to all go away. But the truth is, historically speaking, sometimes the best opportunities for those people to keep their cool, see through all the noise, the clutter, and the chaos, and just go out there and get in the marketplace and focus on the things they can control and not obsess over the vast majority of things they cannot control.
It's such a good point. That's a great lesson for life anyway. There's things that are external that affect us that we can't do anything about. So there's really not a whole lot of use in complaining about it. My dad used to tell the story of the guy who gets cut off in the freeway, and for the next hour, he's just fuming and ranting and raving and calling that guy names. And in reality, that guy probably had no idea he did that. He didn't do it on purpose. It just kind of happened. And rather than spend an hour getting your blood temperature up, why not just shrug it off? Hey, that sucked. Oh well, move on with your life. Now, that's easy to say when it's a simple thing. When you have genocide in the world, that's just a hard thing to get your mind and heart around. So the first thing we should say is that our hearts go out to anybody affected by what's going on. And it's just awful to watch, awful to think about. And it actually got us thinking about some of the awful things that have happened during our investor lifetime. I mean, Russ and I have been investing for decades. When you've been investing for decades, you've seen the good times, the amazing times, the great parts of real estate. But you also see what happens globally that is a huge challenge. Wear on the economy has a direct effect on your life, on your tenant's life, those kinds of things. But you also see the long picture. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the idea of think and do being better than wait and see. When things are tough, people want to wait and see what happens. But thinking, being strategic, being intentional, and then taking measured action is often a much better way to go. This last weekend was our Secrets of Successful syndication in Dallas, Texas. Hello to all the folks that came out. Had a nice, big, full room of folks, and it was great to connect. But in light of what's happening, and of course the seminar took place before the attacks, but we had a panel scheduled on when things go wrong. Because as we're teaching people who want to raise capital, one of the real realities is that things don't always go perfectly. In fact, rarely do things go perfectly or as planned.
Well, we were talking before thinking that the big stress on everybody was the rapid increase in interest rates and all of the distortions and pain that it had caused in financial markets, credit markets, the cost of borrowing, obviously, mortgage businesses down to the lowest it's been since 1996. It's taken a lot of equity with it, and access to be able to tap in that equity profitably has been difficult. Caps rates have been rising, which means that equity has been coming out of the multifamily space, and you've seen some shorter-term financing arrangements blow up in people's faces, and I think you're going to see more distress in the market. So in anticipation of that, we're saying, hey, let's have a discussion about keeping your wits about you. How do people who've been there done that? How does somebody like a Kenny McElroy, who started investing way before 2008 and made it through 2008, not just surviving, but thriving? And how has he begun to position himself based on the signals this current economic environment is sending? And so that was kind of our theme going in. And of course, as this thing began to broke and it's out there in the Middle East, it has an implication with respect to energy and oil costs. And it had an impact on gold. We watched gold go up as a bid to safe haven, and even bonds caught a bid as a safe haven. And so geopolitical uncertainty does have an effect on financial markets. A lot of times it's knee-jerk reaction. It just happens very quickly. We're not in the business of trading that volatility. So people on Wall Street are obsessing over all this because they're trying to move in and out of positions to capture some margin in all the volatility. We're really looking more at like, what is the impact on the long game? And when you take the long-term perspective, to your point, Robert, the idea that when you've been investing for decades, you can kind of step back and think. So when I opened up my presentation at Secrets of Successful Syndication, I went all the way back to when my grandmother was born in 1918. And I thought, if you think about it, and I gave this presentation at the Investor Summit, and I started out just kind of going through a financial history. And I said, when the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913, right after that, we got into World War I, 1914 to 1918. The United States was late getting into that, and the war ended, in 1918. My grandmother was born in 1918. And all the money printing that happened in support of the war ended up creating the Roaring '20s. And the back end of the Roaring '20s, this big boom, was a big bust called the Great Depression. And so she's a teenager during the Great Depression. And then she becomes a young mother, and she gives birth to my mother in 1939. And 2 years later, Pearl Harbor happens, and we're in the next Great War. And this looks like an existential threat. And then my mother grows up, and she has a child, me. And within the first couple of years of my life, the President of the United States is staring at nuclear bombs off the coast of Florida and Cuba, and it's this big international brouhaha. And then a year later, that president gets shot in the head in Dallas, Texas. And then we have race riots. And, my point is, at any point along those lines, not diminishing the human tragedy that occurred along the way, all of the heartache, the people that suffered death, loss, not diminishing that at all. But pragmatically, as a real estate investor, anywhere along the line, had you bought real estate and owned it for the next 20 to 30 years, you're going to have been better off than had you not done that. And the fact is that when so many people are unsure of what to do or unwilling to take action, if you have the ability to keep your wits about you and step in and keep a longer view, you may be able to pick up some deals as long as you structure it so you can hold it for the next 10 or 20 years. That was kind of our theme at Secrets of Successful Syndication as we're training people who are effectively managing money on behalf of others, just to make sure that you're taking the long view. Because if you wait till everybody else comes out and everybody else sees it, and then you're going along with the crowd, then usually you're chasing the deal and chasing the trend instead of being in front of it.
You bring up some great points, Russ. Most people think of real estate investing as something you do to create additional income. It'd be great if we owned some rental houses so we had some positive cash flow coming in. And then you get the bug and you start to look at bigger properties, and before long it becomes a meaningful part of your income. And then many investors get to our favorite point, which is when you cross over to where your passive income from real estate meets or exceeds the active income you you create from your job or business. Doesn't mean you stop going to work or running a business, but it means you have that comfort level. But real estate is a whole lot more than that. And one of the things it does is provide stability and hedges in uncertain times. Real estate, and to your point, Russ, as long as we have the rule of law and the ability to own private property, real estate can create all kinds of upside for us. We talk about not only the income, but the appreciation in a market, which sometimes is tied to inflation, arguably, usually, but there are other things that make property go up in value. Plus, there's the tax benefits of the fact that your tenant makes your mortgage payment, things we talked about with Jason Hartman last week, a lot of reasons to love real estate. But when times are tough, that can be an excellent time to position yourself to move in a market because there's just fewer people looking at it. And also, real estate can heal. Back after the 2008 debacle, we were talking about healing America one house at a time, meaning, neighborhoods where property was in bad shape and there was the ugly duckling house, like private capitalists, mom and pop real estate investors, come along, pick up those houses, give them the TLC they need, turn them into productive assets. And as that goes on in neighborhoods and cities and states, the country heals. And I think there's an opportunity that real estate certainly can't compensate for loss of life, but it can bolster your financial future if you'll be diligent.
Well, and of course, if you end up making a lot of money and you want to contribute to various causes and help, that's your prerogative. It's your money. You can do what you want to do with it. My point is, it's easy to wait until the dust settles. And I think that if you recognize chaos for what it is, it's an opportunity to move when others won't, but you have to have a perspective others don't. And part of that is keeping a cool head. And how do you do that? Well, you do that, first of all, by thinking about the things that might happen in advance. We spend a lot of time doing that, kind of looking at the triggers, the causes, if you will, and the chain of events they're likely to produce. Back when the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown came, we theorized that there would be a 4-phase cascading crisis and that it would roll out. The first thing we were going to have would be a health crisis. And that health crisis, because believing everything that we were being told, and we can talk about whether all that turned out to be true or not, it doesn't matter. At the time, it's what everybody believed, that this was an existential threat to humanity, that everybody had to be locked down. Whatever price we had to pay economically was worth it. And so say, okay, we're going to lock down. Well, what comes after that? Well, obviously, when you stop doing commerce, the money stops circulating. It's like having a heart attack. So you go from a health crisis to an economic crisis. And they papered over some of that by stimulus checks and eviction moratoriums and deferrals and forbearances and things they tried to do to get ahead of it. You can argue whether you think it was right or wrong, whether they had the authority or didn't have the authority. It doesn't matter. They did it. But the end result was in that, then what comes after that? And when you cannot pay your bills because the money is not flowing, you're going to have bankruptcies and disruptions in the supply chain we saw. And it ends up becoming a financial crisis. And the financial system begins to show some weakness. And we have been in that phase. We had major banks fail. And then the next phase after that is a currency crisis, meaning that as they print a lot of money to deal with this. So let's talk about that. We've got this crisis. We know that when COVID-19 hit, we printed tons of money in the same vein that when the great financial crisis hit in 2008, we printed tons of money. Then when the supply chain married the printing of tons of money, we had inflation like we hadn't seen in a very, very long time.
Right.
And then that led to a chain of events jacking up interest rates that I think everybody on Main Street has felt. Then you got this war in Ukraine. Russia invades Ukraine. All of a sudden, we're spending gobs of money, almost an unlimited checkbook, and it's been a big fight in Congress, right? All kinds of money going there. Now we've got the situation in the Middle East. If history or past is prologue, then the odds are we're going to print a bunch of money and get involved there too. And you say, well, yeah, but we have to do that. That's fine. I'm not talking about the politics of it. I'm saying the reality of when you begin to produce money and go into further debt and do more government spending to support whatever crisis there is, it does have an economic impact. And if you understand a little bit of that cause and effect by hanging out with people that study that, like George Gammon and Kenny McElroy, who takes that macro stuff and brings it down to Main Street and does a really good job, and you start looking at that, you think, okay, what's likely to happen here? And how can I position myself to, A, mitigate the risk, because there's going to be some risks and some stuff I may not see coming, but I want to try to see everything I possibly can. And how am I going to take advantage of the opportunities? Because the flip side of every problem is an opportunity. And so it just means that when these things happen, you've got to lean into what you can control and study what you can see so that you can begin to anticipate and be prepared for what you can't see and the things you can't anticipate. And people who do that, they don't bat 1,000. But the likelihood is they're going to be better off than the people who are completely unaware and prepared, or the people who completely sit out.
So when things do go wrong in your home, in your neighborhood, in the world, what can you do about it? That's what we're going to talk about today on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
Live nationwide, you're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
The Real Estate Guys are throwing a party and you're invited. Join us at the New Orleans Investment Conference, November 1st through 4th. Now in its 49th year, it's the world's longest running investment conference and features some of the biggest names in economics and investing, including James Rickards, George Gammon, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Rick Rule, and Peter Schiff. The Real Estate Guys are speaking in multiple sessions, attending lots of others, and we're hosting an invitation-only party one of the evenings for our friends and listeners, including some VIPs for you to mingle with. So make your plans to join the Real Estate Guys, the New Orleans Investment Conference. With all that's going on in the world, no serious investor can afford to miss it. Send an email to neworleans@realestateguysradio.com and we'll get you all the details. That's neworleans@realestateguysradio.com. And we'll see you there.
Real Estate Guys listeners, are you tired of losing real estate deals due to financing issues? Have you had enough of waiting on banks, lenders, and investor groups to fund new projects? What if there were a way to eliminate all the hassle and invest in real estate on your own terms? I'm here to tell you there is. Patrick Donahoe here from Paradigm Life. I'm an Investopedia Top 100 Most Influential Financial Advisor, and I recently wrote a best-selling book about the financial strategy that changed my entire investment model, and the one that could change yours. To get a copy of my book for free and learn how you can maximize your real estate portfolio by acting as your own bank, send an email to mybank@realestateguysradio.com. Don't make another real estate deal without reading my book first. Email mybank@realestateguysradio.com now to get your copy for free.
Hello, this is Robert Kiyosaki. I'm the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And if you're serious about learning how to invest in real estate, listen to the Real Estate Guys. They really know what they're talking about.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, heard every weekend on this great radio station and all the time at realestateguysradio.com and your favorite podcast outlets. We're talking today about when things go bad. And every real estate investor at some point in their career is going to have to deal with challenges and trouble. And that's not a bad thing. We actually get paid to solve problems. A lot of times, real estate investors put a property manager between them and the tenant. That way, that person can professionally and with a cool head deal with the problems. But today, we're going to talk about how can you manage your psychology and how can you get on the right side of the trades that may be happening when things have and will go wrong. At the Secrets of Successful Syndication, we had a panel. On the panel, we had lots of awesome folks that have been through the mill and some just really great lessons. But I think let's start, Russ, with the emotional capital, the mental fortitude, just being prepared, right? In the Boy Scouts, we say be prepared. One of the things to be prepared for is when things go right. So that's why we have a pro forma and a business plan and expectations on an investment property. But we also need to be prepared for for things not to go right?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, you just have to know yourself. If you're the type of person that is given to emotional swings, if you get really high, you get really low, you get really afraid, or you get a little greedy, these are the typical investor emotions, then you just have to recognize and do what Jim Collins says, confront the brutal facts. And that's not even the brutal facts about the situations. That's the brutal facts about your own human frailty and weakness. God didn't make any perfect people. So you can be successful even if you have some flaws, if you're willing to admit that you do. And then what you do is you align with people who can help hold you accountable, to help talk you off the ledge, who can help you think things through when you're having a difficult time. Blair Singer says when emotions run high, intelligence runs low. This is where you wage war, if you will, by a multitude of counselors. You have people who are more seasoned, more experienced, have technical expertise, maybe aren't as close to the problem. If you think about, for example, surgeons. Typically, a surgeon will not operate on their own loved one because even though they have the skill, the emotional attachment clouds their judgment, makes it more difficult for them to think clearly. I at the Secrets of Successful Syndication, I said, most of us could walk across a balance beam that's positioned on the floor where the cost of making a mistake is we fall 8 inches, right? You take that very same balance beam and the same skill set and put it across 2 high rises 10 stories high, and you got to walk across it. Even though it's the exact same skill set, the emotional strain of the stakes make it so difficult to perform at a high level. And I talked about my admiration for many years for Joe Montana. Joe Montana was the Hall of Fame quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers when they first established themselves as a dynasty in the 1980s. And he, arguably wasn't the greatest athlete on the field. There were other quarterbacks in his era that were far better athletically. They were athletic specimens, as they call them, just really genetically fantastic athletes. But Joe Montana had this uncanny ability to stay cool under intense pressure. If you watch that second Super Bowl that they played against the Cincinnati Bengals, where they were down and he got the ball, had 90 yards to go and like less than 2 minutes to do it. And if they didn't perform, if they didn't complete that drive and score a touchdown, they were going to lose. And he was joking in the huddle about seeing John Candy on the sidelines or in the stands.
Right.
And his teammates are like, Joe, but he had a way of keeping his cool. And because he was able to keep his stay emotionally level-headed, stay cool, he was able to marshal all of his available resources and play at a high level. Well, I think the same thing is true. If you have to make business decisions and there's a lot of pressure, you have to learn how to manage your emotions. And sometimes that's not just you managing your own state by being aware of it, but surrounding yourself with other people who can help you do it. And sometimes those people cannot be too close to the problem. The fact that they're not close to the problem lets them have a more balanced perspective. And so to me, that's one of the most important things is just understand you're an emotional creature. High stakes situations are going to make you emotional. Learn how you react in emotional situations and surround yourself with people that can help you be more even-keeled so you can use all of your intelligence and all of your resources even under intense pressure.
100%. I'm thinking of the contrast between the mom and pop, more emotionally geared investor and the professional investor, whether that is a family office or a real estate investment trust or someone that works for a big hedge fund. A lot of folks who acquire real estate, it's just their day job. It's not their money. They're entrusted to put deals together. They're diligent. They're competent, but they're rarely emotional. Oh, sure, when the right deal comes across their desk, they might get some excitement because they see it's going to be something that meets their fund's parameters, but they do not have that personal, emotional side that we often do. I talked about property managers earlier. Early on in my career, I figured out that I could never make a great property manager for my own properties because I cared too much about people. I was the on-site residential manager for a 48-unit apartment building, and people would come in with their excuse for why they couldn't pay the rent. And my assistant manager was my grandfather. He'd been a police officer for decades, and boy, what a great lesson. He could sniff out the real from the fake. He knew exactly people's nature, and he would come in, and I'd have somebody want to apply for an apartment, and he'd be standing behind them, looking at me, shaking his head no. Now, this is in the great state of California where you can't just, have a gut feeling and deny somebody tenancy. No, there's more to it than that. But I'll tell you, over the years, he was right pretty much every single time. And so you develop that fortitude as an investor. And it's easy to say, hard to do. Your first few properties, you tend to be pretty emotional. You're giddy when it goes right. You're distraught when it goes wrong. You know, I used to deal with first-time home buyers back in the day, and they got their heart set on a house, and it was multiple bids, and they missed the house, and it was just tears and prayers and all the things. And that's okay maybe for the house you live in, but as investors, we need to step back, right? We need to have what we would call investor mentality, not consumer mentality. And most people who buy homes are consumers. They're just buying a house to live in. But this isn't for us. We're investors. We're going to think methodically. We pick a market not on emotion, but on metrics. We're data-driven, all those things. And yet when a crisis comes along, it's easy to get pulled into that. So I think your point, Russ, about having counsel, people around you, a sounding board, could be someone that invests with you, or maybe it's just a friend that has nothing to do with the outcome of your investments who can give you some of that guidance. So emotional fortitude, that's super important. I think the other thing to do, we mentioned a couple times the long-term perspective, and real estate is a long-term asset. You can't really day trade real estate very effectively. And so if you're going to be married to the property, married to the market, when things go bad, you have to ask yourself those fundamental questions. Is this a forever thing, or will this too pass?
So I think that that's where that perspective comes in. So it's not just people who are distanced from the problem, but people who have ridden through previous cycles. And I understand, having once been a young person, that sometimes we think the older folks don't get it. I've heard many times, you don't understand. This is new. I was in Silicon Valley during the dot-com boom, and it was the new economy, and all of a sudden profits didn't matter. You just had to have a great story, and you were going to get market share, and if you had eyeballs. And in some regards, that was true, because people were all willing to pile into these stocks and bid up the price, even though they had no earnings, based on the idea that somewhere along the line they would figure it out. And some did. And then you can point at that exception and call that the rule, and everybody's piling in, getting wiped out. So it is important to, begin to think rationally. I want to come back to this other idea of controlling your environment, because part of your responsibility is to lead and communicate. And we talk about this with our syndicators all the time, because they're going to be leading teams. They're going to be leading their investors through the ups and downs of whatever's going on. And you might think, well, I just invest in my own account. Well, that's true. But most of the time, you're still going to have people, and those people are close to you. It could be a spouse, could be children, could be parents. And you might say, well, yeah, but they're not invested with me. No, but they're invested in you. In other words, they care about you. And most people who care about you when things are going however they're going have opinions. And if you're given to care about what other people think, and people are coming in, sometimes you have to not listen to certain people. You have to ask yourself, is this person qualified to have an opinion? And then you got to be careful where you go for comfort. If you go talk to people who are empathetic with you, they care about you, they'll listen to you. It's easy to get into, we're going through a book study right now, The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. And it's easy to have them take you into the gap, to point out everything you did wrong, everything that won't work. And the problem is, when you go into that limiting thinking, you can't see the possibilities. Sam Zell, who we quote all the time, and we did again this last weekend at Secrets of Successful Syndication, his book, Am I Being Too Subtle?, said his superpower was not just the ability to see the upside. Everybody can see the upside. Everybody can get into a deal believing it's going to go well. Do you have the ability to get into a deal seeing all the problems? In other words, instead of hiding from them, I'm just going to hope that doesn't happen. Hope's not a strategy.
Right.
And being around people who are comforting but aren't able to give you good counsel, or worse, are going to reinforce negative non-possibility thinking. So controlling your environment. When my late wife died, the very first thing at the top of my list I said I had to do was to cultivate positive energy in my life, in my health, in the ideas I put in my head, in the things I allowed myself to think, the people I hung around with. And I could have easily become very depressed, cynical, and unhappy, and maybe given up on life. I came very close. But I realized if I did not lead and communicate, starting with myself and then the people around me, that I probably was going to end up in a dark place I didn't want to go. And I'm happy to tell you that ended up being a great decision. And now every time I get into a difficult time, I think, okay, I got to cultivate positive energy in my life.
Tough times don't last, but tough people do. We're talking about when things go wrong. Not a matter of if, but when. We'll have more thoughts, and we'll play real estate trivia next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Real estate investment advice right in your mailbox. Sign up for the free Real Estate Guys newsletter at realestateguysradio.com.
When it comes to successful rental property investing, it pays to be picky. Pick the right markets, pick profitable properties, and pick great property management. That's easier said than done, but we've got great news. Terry Kerr and his rockstar team at Mid-South Homebuyers are going strong in Memphis, Tennessee, and Little Rock, Arkansas, too. So for a top-notch turnkey single-family home rental property, whether you're a new investor or have a large portfolio already, pick Terry Kerr and Mid-South for a truly A-plus investing experience. To learn more, send an email to midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. That's midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. Are you achieving everything you want in life? What if there was a time-tested way for you to get everything you've ever dreamed of? The most successful people in life set goals and keep themselves accountable. But how? The good news is that it's not rocket science. You too can learn the skills and unleash the motivation that will create success in your life. Hi, this is Robert Helms, and I'd like to personally invite you to attend Create Your Future, the 2024 Goals Retreat, January 12th to 14th in Dallas, Texas. This unique weekend event has been called phenomenal, inspirational, and life-changing by the thousands of people that have attended. Hear from some of them and find out more at goalsretreat.com. Get your life back on track, physically, spiritually, and financially. Attend the 2024 Goals Retreat on the second weekend of the new year. Visit goalsretreat.com to learn more and get on the advance notice list. This is no dress rehearsal. Live the life you were meant to. Visit goalsretreat.com or call 888-489-7723 extension 18. That's goalsretreat.com.
Hey, I'm Jim Grant. I'm the editor and indeed the founder of Grant's Interest Rate Observer. And you, ladies and gentlemen, you lucky people, are listening to the Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks for tuning into the show. Registration has just opened up for the 22nd Annual Investors Summit at Sea. Join the Real Estate Guys and an all-star faculty in June 2024 as we sail the high seas and look ahead to what the future may bring. It's the highest level event we do, and it's absolutely extraordinary. Almost half the cabins are spoken for, but there's room for you if you go to the website at realestateguysradio.com and click the button that says Summit. We're talking this week about anticipating things not going correctly, and then what do you do when they go wrong? It's inevitable as a real estate investor. Before we get back to that discussion, it's time to play Real Estate Trivia, where we give you a chance to win a prize by knowing today's trivia question that has something to do with real estate. As soon as you hear the question and think you know the answer, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address, because the first person that gets it right gets a copy of one of the most popular books in the world, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the 20th Anniversary Edition by Robert Kiyosaki. That could be yours if you know today's real estate trivia question. Last week on the show, we were talking to single-family investor Jason Hartman. We asked this: which day of the week is the best day to list your home? Well, data shows that homes listed on Thursdays sell for approximately $3,000 more than the list price on average. Why is that? Well, the leading theory is that Thursday is when serious buyers and their agents start compiling their lists of open houses and MLS homes to show for the weekend. Here's our real estate trivia question for this week. We're talking about when things go wrong, when you get shafted. So here's our real estate trivia question. Where was the first elevator shaft built in a building? Way back, they certainly had stairs and ways to climb up ladders and things like that. But today, of course, in a tall building, you would design elevator shafts. Well, where was the first elevator shaft built into a building? If you know that, or just want to take a guess, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, your best guess, and your physical mailing address. The first person that gets it right gets the 20th Anniversary Edition of Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That's today's real estate trivia question. Things are often awesome, But every now and then things go wrong. And when you're dealing with adversity, how do you maintain your composure? And then what do you do beyond that? We're talking about that today. Not an easy topic, but an important topic, because no matter what you do to live, thrive, and survive, you're going to have bad days. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have people that want to drag you down. And we had a member of the panel at the syndication event who helps a lot of people raise capital. He's helped create dozens and dozens of millionaires, which is an amazing feat. And he told a story about nearly quitting. He had a situation come up and his mentor took the other side. And even though when everything came out in the light of day, our friend was correct, at the time, it sure didn't feel like it. And, he didn't necessarily need the money. And so he was wallowing and was like, I'm just going to blow this off. And it was great that he was vulnerable enough to tell that story. But the part I recognized is, man, had you have given up then, it wouldn't just be about your lifestyle. It would be about the over 100 people whose lives you have had a huge change, and the thousands of people that you have a meaningful change. None of that would have happened if you just gave up. So one of the big lessons when things go wrong is to never give up. Think about giving up. Ponder throwing in the towel. Wonder what it would be like if you went to lay on a beach in a hammock for 10 years. But don't do it. When you're mission-minded, then you got to get back up. Or as they say, fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Yeah, the thing is, I remember having my first child and having that picture sitting on the dashboard of my car as I was driving around Silicon Valley as a young, inexperienced, highly insecure, largely incapable sales rep. And getting rejected and just having a terrible time and having all my insecurities magnified. I was very fortunate that I got a chance to listen to a cassette tape by a guy named Tom Hopkins called How to Master the Art of Selling. And in it, he said, never to see failure as failure, but only the feedback you need. And that evoked in me this new way of looking at everything I was doing. Instead of taking it personally, I just became curious. Instead of worrying about outcomes, I became focused on activity. And I said, well, if I do the activity, and this is something Tony Robbins teaches, if you see somebody doing something successfully, if you just emulate their behavior, the odds are you can be successful too. It takes a lot of the pressure off. But the thing is, every time I would look at that baby's picture on my dashboard and I thought about throwing in the towel, I couldn't. It wasn't an option. Failure absolutely was not an option. I had to finish. And that was very clear, very visceral. I think any parent out there listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. The part that you're bringing up, Robert, is a really important nuance. And we've had this happen more than once in our program. And it especially happens when something really goes wrong, when you have a really bad deal, or worse, a bad actor behind a bad deal. And all of a sudden everybody says, gee, I don't want to be a part of this. Well, here's the problem. What if police officers, what if heart surgeons, what if firefighters decided that, I've saved 1,000 people, but this person just died. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe something outside of my control went wrong, but it hurts so badly. I feel so terrible, or worse, that maybe one of my comrades was a bad person and I'm guilty by association. I'm not a bad person, but they're a bad person and I don't want to be near that. Well, the problem is when you quit, you give up the territory to the bad people who don't care, and that's problem number one. Problem number two, to your point, Robert, all the people, all the good that you could have done if you would have stayed on the job goes away. If I'm a heart surgeon and I've done 99 successful surgeries and I have one and the guy dies on the table and I quit, then what about the 1,000 people I was going to save after that are never going to be saved by me because I quit? So it's not just quitting on your dream. It's not just quitting on your opportunity to have an abundant lifestyle and freedom and enjoyment and all the things you want. It's really understanding that all the prosperity that you're going to go out in the world and accumulate for yourself is going to be in exchange for the good that you do for the world. And so when you give up on your desire to have nice things, you're actually giving up on your desire to do good things to earn it. And all the people that would benefit from the good you would do goes away. So when times get tough, my strongest counsel is take your eyes off yourself and think about all of the other people and think of them like your children. I mean, I understand they're not children, but when I looked at my baby's picture on my dashboard, I thought to myself, I cannot quit on her. She's counting on me to figure this out. I've got to keep going. And I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad for people like Tom Hopkins and the other mentors that I had in my life who kept encouraging me to keep going. And I hope we're doing that for some people as they're listening to us right now.
You know, you bring up a great point, and I want to make sure we call it out here. Sometimes when things go wrong, they aren't your fault. It's just circumstance. But sometimes they are. And when you foul up, when you step in it, when you make a mess, when you raise capital and then make a strategic error and it costs your people money, that's when you really need the fortitude. And the first thing, I remember one of our syndication events, Ken McElroy was our VIP speaker at lunch, and he had a great thing to share with us. Somebody had asked him about delivering bad news. And we're not just talking about when things go bad, but having to tell your investors about it. He said, well, you know, what I found is that delivering bad news builds trust. Meaning we all want to give the great news to the investors, but when it's bad news and you can say, listen, I just want you to hear it from me. This is what happened and it's a problem. We're going to work our way out of it, but it doesn't look too good right then. You just built a bond, and people aren't always happy about that news, but they'll almost always respect you for it.
And I've told this story many times, and every time I mention the guy's name, I always worry I'm going to alienate half the audience. But I did have an opportunity to ask Donald Trump a question before he was President Trump. And the question was very simple. What did you learn in the good times? What did you learn in the bad times? And if you decide to run for president or become president, how will those lessons help you? And his response was classic. He goes, well, I didn't really learn anything in the good times. Which is right there. I mean, again, it's his opinion, but I can tell you in my life, the vast majority of great lessons, really heartfelt, life-changing, transformational lessons, came from working my way through very difficult times. And so, if nothing else, if you're going through tough times or you're learning how to navigate tough times that aren't even of your own making, but you still got to deal with the fallout. And there's innocent victims, collateral damage of things going on in the world right now, obviously in the physical world and just in their safety and their well-being, but also in the financial world. There's going to be things because of rising interest rates and a frail financial system, things that could happen, regulations can change. At the end of the day, if you recognize that every single one of those experiences is going to give you an MBA, it's going to give you a PhD, it's going to give you a real-world education that's going to help you recognize a similar problem sooner, that's going to help you develop an inner strength and fortitude you didn't know you have because you got pressed to the edges of your ability. It's going to reveal to you who your friends are, who your best advisors are, and who aren't. And you're actually going to emerge stronger. And in this case with Donald Trump, he just goes, well, I didn't learn anything in the good times, but I learned in the bad times it's always good to have a little cash. Well, you know what? I took that lesson because I didn't have any cash going through 2008. That was one of the big problems. I was very dependent upon healthy credit markets. And so when the credit market started to implode, I was having credit lines turned off through no fault of my own. I was still making all my payments on time. There was nothing in my credit profile that gave the credit companies any reason to cut me off, but they were limiting their exposure because they saw risk down the road and they wanted to mitigate that risk, and they didn't want to be vulnerable to me even though they had previously deemed me a good credit risk. Well, the problem for me was when that liquidity went away and I lost that working capital in the form of credit lines, it virtually put me out of business. And I didn't have a plan B. And so you better believe when Donald Trump said it's always good to have a little cash, that resonated. I'm like, you know what? Got that lesson. And I paid a big, big price for that. Well, so did he. That's where he got the lesson. And so one of the things you can go through to find redeeming value in a difficult time is, I'm a big fan of journaling. You get up early in the morning and you write down all the circumstances that are going on. You write down everything you feel about it. You write down everything that you can do about it, but also write down everything that you're learning. And say, hey, knowing what I know now, if and when this ever happens again, how would I position myself to take advantage of the opportunities that are present? How would I position myself to mitigate some of the risks that are likely? And knowing what I know now, if I could go through this experience again, what would I do differently? I created a whole investment strategy called strategic real asset investing that grew out of, if I could go back and coach myself in 2005, knowing what I knew in 2015, what would I have done differently? how much is that worth? It could be worth a ton, right? If I implement the things that I learned and still have enough time in my life to implement them, then I have the opportunity to take those great lessons and capitalize on them. So there's always redeeming value. And if you focus your time and attention on seeing and capturing that redeeming value, it takes a lot of this total loss mentality, and this is a complete waste of time, and it takes that emotional strain out of the situation, and it'll make you a better leader.
And let's face it, leading is easier in good times than bad times. And whether you're leading a team of 3 or leading a team of 300, everyone looks to you. And when it's your deal and things go wrong, they look to you. Sometimes because it's your fault. Sometimes it's not your fault, but they think it is. And it's interesting when people want to blame. There's a lot of that going on these days. When things go wrong, they don't want to accept the responsibility. They want to blame. And when they're pointing the finger, they sometimes forget they have 3 fingers pointing back at themselves. We've seen people who made investment decisions, and then the investment didn't go well, and it's easy to blame everything but themselves. And it's really not very productive. When things do go wrong, you want to take stock. You want to see, where was the problem? What happened? How can we do to fix that so it doesn't happen next time? How can we put procedures in place? But there's some things just happen in life. And I shared a quote a few weeks back with our mentoring program, and it's from Jill Blakeway. It says, "When a toxic person can no longer control you, they will try to control how others see you. The misinformation will feel unfair, but stay above it, trusting that other people will eventually see the truth, just like you did." Cool heads prevail, and it's easy to get caught up in the emotion when things go wrong, but it's even more important that you quietly just do the work. This last week, a gentleman passed away at the age of 92 that not too many people know. His name was Chuck Feeney. He was kind of the king of the duty-free stores. And one of the things he did in his life was give away, through philanthropy, over $8 billion, while leaving himself 10 years ago a retirement budget of just $2 million. He was one of these guys that loved making a difference, loved building a business, but didn't really have any personal need for the money. He didn't own a car. He lived in a modest apartment. He took the train and the bus. And the reason you don't know his name is because he wasn't about that. He did everything you could do as a billionaire to keep his name and his deeds quiet. So while there are bad things happening, there are good things happening as well. We're talking about what you can do when things go wrong. We've got some closing thoughts next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
Hey, it's Robert Helms. Thanks so much for listening to the show today. I want to personally invite you to come see an amazing real estate market that combines excellent cash flow, offshore diversification, and what we affectionately call lifestyle investing. Come join me from December 8th to 11th in the beautiful country of Belize. The Real Estate Guys have been bringing investors to Belize for more than 18 years now, and our discovery trip is designed to show you the market like nobody else can. Sure, Belize is breathtakingly beautiful. The people are wonderful. And wait till you taste the food. But the real opportunity is the real estate investment potential. There's all types of opportunity in Belize when it comes to real estate investing, including both long-term and short-term rentals, commercial and retail triple net properties, business opportunities, land acquisition, development, agriculture, and more. And as the only country in Latin America with English as its official language, it's easy to understand the law. Property rights are strong, and contracts are in English. And in Ambergris Caye, a unique situation exists where demand for rentals continues to outstrip supply, creating a compelling environment for investors. So come see for yourself. Join me December 8th through 11th in Ambergris Caye, Belize, as we study the market, learn about the sustainable drivers, and tour lots of beautiful real estate. And like all of our field trips, there are no properties for sale during the weekend. Rather, you'll meet lots of local providers that will help educate you about the market so that you can follow up with them after the trip if the market is interesting to you. You've heard about Belize on the Real Estate Guys for all these years. Now come see what all the excitement is about. Plus, we'll have lots of time over meals and activities to talk about all things real estate. To get the details, go to the website at realestateguysradio.com and click on Events, where you'll find the Belize Discovery Trip. Once you register, you'll get information about our group hotel rates as well as travel details. So join me in Belize December 8th through 11th. It's a beautiful country with lots of amazing possibilities, and the only thing missing is you. Go to realestateguysradio.com under events, and I look forward to seeing you in beautiful Belize.
Hey, this is John Asraf, and you are listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks for tuning into the show. Hey, join the Real Estate Guys at the 49th Annual New Orleans Investment Conference. It's right around the corner. You can hang out with us and amazing people like George Gammon, James Rickards, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Peter Schiff, Brian London, Dana Samuelson, and more. Get an invitation to our private listener party and learn how to register for the event by sending an email to New Orleans at realestateguysradio.com. New Orleans at realestateguysradio.com. What can we do when things go wrong? We can wallow, we can put our head in the mud, or we can persevere. And Russ, I think that's one of the things that really gets people through crisis is when they have a big vision, they have a hairy, audacious goal, and they are persistent.
Well, you know, what's really interesting is I spent a lot of time talking about this. In fact, I'm working on a book I call The Purpose Formula, and in it, it's the 5 Ps. And the first one's passion. Most of us have passion. We really want something. Actually, that's not the first one. It's the second one. But, you know, if you gravitate towards something, if you want to do something, if you like something, anybody who's raised kids knows it's usually a good idea, unless it's detrimental, to allow a kid to pursue their passion and see what their gifting and interest might be. But one of the other tests about whether or not you're really on track is persistence or perseverance. When you get knocked down, you know, if you're a football player and you really love the game, when you get hurt, you can't wait to get back on the field. You know, when you get injured, you work really hard in rehab. You can't wait to get back on the field. There's other times when things happen to you in life and you get knocked down and you're like, you know, I don't ever want to do that again. That's not worth it to me. Okay. And so it doesn't mean that you aren't tough. It could be your psychology just telling you this isn't that important to you. And that's okay, because there could be something else out there that is that important to you. One of the hardest things in life is to really, really figure out what you want. We are programmed where marketing messages are designed to tell us who we should be, what we should think, what's cool, what's valuable, what's important, and we are having our psychology manipulated all the time. Marketers depend upon what I call covetousness or greed or envy. You look at other people and think, oh, that person must be happy. You watch a beer commercial and you see these people who have 6% body fat playing volleyball in the hot sun and quenching their thirst with a beer. And the hidden message is you can have a 6-pack and be ripped if you just drink our beer, which of course is patently false, right? But it's that connection. And so you just have to understand that you live in a world that's going on. So one of the most important investments you can make is spending time to really think about what it is you really care about, the change you want to be in the world, and what you're willing to do for the world to get what you want out of the world. And you start putting all that together around a business model, and you get up every day and prosecute that business model, knowing that the very nature of living, and especially business, is problems, right? If you wake up and you don't have any problems, you're in the morgue. You every day you're going to have problems. And so you can't wish that you don't have problems. You can't wish that you have less problems. You want to become a world-class problem solver, and you want to solve the kind of problems that you really enjoy solving. And when you are doing that, you're waking up every day and you're making the world better because you're solving problems. You're loving life because you're mentally, emotionally, physically, actively engaged in something you're passionate about. And sometimes you don't really know until you get knocked down. When things go wrong, if you cannot wait to get back in the fight, that tells you something. And I think it's a good thing.
You know, we tend to live our lives at a very superficial level. We don't give ourselves the gift of going deep. And when you can put yourself there, you can get real clarity. For many, many years, at the beginning of the new year, we have our 2.5-day goals retreat. It's coming up January 12th, 13th, and 14th in Dallas, Texas. It's called Create Your Future. And if you lack that clarity, if you aren't sure, if you have any uneasiness about where you are in life, well, then come on out and hang out with us. This will be a remarkable time for not just you, but the people you care about to get focused.
Yeah, I mean, everything you do in your business and investing life should be about funding your dreams. And it's a dream to make a difference in the world. It's a dream to have things for yourself. It's a dream to do things for the people you care about and create opportunities. It's a dream to be safe and protect yourself. And all of those things are going to come out of your investments. But the thing is, how do you really know? Now, some people say, well, I don't care. I'll just invest in anything so I can make money. And then once I have money, then I can figure it out, right? I call that doing the two-step. I think it's a huge mistake. A lot of young people, and if you're a young person listening to this and you still haven't figured it out, then you especially want to be at the Create Your Future event. If you're a parent of younger person, you're teenager and above, and the best gift you could give them is bring them to this. When my kids were young, I used to say, look, most people who are young are going to get into their adult life and they're going to ask themselves, what can I do to make money? And then they're going to go get trained in how to do that thing and hope they get a job doing that thing so they can make money. And then they'll make some money, and then they'll start to go into debt to have the nice car and the house, and they'll take on their obligations. And they wake up one day in their mid-30s and they realize they're a debt slave and they're doing something to make money. They've succeeded in their goal. They just don't like what they're doing. But now they're trapped.
Right.
And this is so common. And that's because they did the two-step. If instead you would ask yourself, what do I love to do? And how can I build a business that will pay me to do that? Now you're going to get the money, but you're also going to get the lifestyle you want, not at the end of the financial rainbow, but along the way. And so to me, I think the sooner you can get that level of clarity in your life, the happier an investor, business person, and human being you're going to be.
The Create Your Future 2024 Goals Retreat happens the second weekend of the new year. You can get all the details at goalsretreat.com. The big message today is when things go bad, we need to have empathy, we need to pull ourselves together, and we need to keep it on. It's easy to say, it's hard to do, but if you can master that, you'll be a great investor no matter what the world brings to your door. Hey, next week we've got a great guest on the show. Until then, go out and make some equity happen.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers, low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct, asset protection strategies for real estate investors from attorney and Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys Radio Show.